we're back. And if you're joining us right now, we're just getting our second conversation for this morning started. And we are joined by Keith Gilges, who is the outgoing Chargé d'Affaires from the U.S. Embassy of Belize. Good morning.
Gavin, Marlene, good morning. It's so great to be back on your show.
No, it's great to have you here, and it's great to have you in the studio.
In
right?
person, I know. It's kind of bookended, you know, starting 3 years ago in person, and then we were remote for a little while, so it's nice to be back in person.
Yeah, but of course, since you bring it up, why don't we start talking about the beginning of that 3-year journey, and let's go back in time a little bit, and let's talk about when you first got here. So, sort of, what were your expectations, if any, and how you felt at that time starting working right here in Belize?
Yeah. So, gosh, I arrived. It was late July of 2018, and it's hard to believe that that's almost 3 years ago already. And I remember I spent the first 2-3 months or so just saying, hey, I want to get out and about. And there were a couple events that the media showed up to, and they're like, hey, we'd love to talk to you. And I was like, hey, give me a little time. Let me find my way around. Let me sort of understand Belize a little bit better before I start talking to the media. And then this was, I think, the very first show that I did, probably in October, November, you know, way back then. And I said at the time, this is not let me pop in, say hi, and then I'll show up 3 years later to say goodbye, but it'll be a conversation. And we'll keep talking about the key issues that are coming up and engaging with you, engaging with the public. And it has been, in the words of Jerry Garcia, you know, what a long, strange trip it's been, particularly these past 18 months. But it's just been, you know, as I've said, the honor of my lifetime so far to have this opportunity to serve here.
Yeah. Who would imagine that in 3 years, half of that time you'd be spent living in a pandemic?
It is remarkable. I will say this, besides how well Belize has handled the pandemic, if you were going to choose, and we did not know this at the start of the pandemic, but if you were going to choose a place to be, I don't think you could have picked a better place than Belize to go through this pandemic. It's been remarkable. But what an amazing place to be during this challenging time for everybody.
Yeah, it also meant, you know, from a work point of view, that in rolling out some of the projects that you were going to do, they shifted. We saw quite a bit of support coming in for COVID relief and for being able to cope through the pandemic. Talk about being able to pivot at the time when the pandemic started and ensuring that you were still offering the type of support that the country needed.
Yeah. Well, again, the idea is that as part of our partnership with Belize, it's not just what we want to offer, but what does Belize need, and making sure those things are lashed up. So we had a grant, you know, to help with COVID through UNICEF, and then the floods hit. And UNICEF came and said, hey, we'd like to pivot because right now the immediate need is not just PPE or other supplies. It is sanitation equipment, it is sanitation supplies, it is housing and bedding and all these things for people that were impacted by the floods. And they said, hey, can you pivot? Absolutely. Do where the need is. And then we were able to recently complete that grant, getting back to sanitation issues. There were some interesting other things that came about because of COVID. You know, my public affairs shop wasn't able to do a lot of the programming it had planned, and these things are planned pretty far in advance and budgeted pretty far in advance. So there's no money left over at the end. But then when suddenly we couldn't do those projects, there was an opportunity to do something else. And that ended up becoming the Empowering Communities to Empower Themselves program. And that was getting into local communities where there are people who are starting their lives over again after having been guests of the Colby Foundation, you know, or having been former gang members. And again, to turn what had been a challenging thing into something that was an opportunity for Belizeans was incredibly rewarding.
Tell us about your personal experience in that, getting to meet the young men. This is a very interesting program, because you're absolutely right. You know, someone comes out of prison and it's very tough to get a job opportunity. So creating a space where employment is possible and possible for others as well is really important in being able to have that transformation outside of the prison. What was your experience like?
So in the position that I'm in, I'm charge d'affaires. So people say, oh, he's a fancy man, and I get to, wear nice suits and sip champagne. I mean, that's sort of the image of it. So being able to say, I'm going to go down and meet some folks that have had a tough time, but they made the choice to turn their lives around. We didn't have to convince them. They had to make those tough choices. And then to be able to go in and say, we can help you some. You're helping yourself most of the way. We can help out and have some faith and trust in you that you're going to continue down this path and turn yourselves around, which helps your communities turn around. For me to get to engage with folks, take off the jacket, go down, talk to people, is the rewarding part of the job. Yes, I get to talk to other high-level people a lot of the time. That's the government-to-government thing. But is that what you remember? Or is it when you were able to touch the lives of people and say, hey, we made a difference there? And again, it was mostly my team doing the work, but I get to show up and meet the people. And that's what is so rewarding.
Any insights that you walk away with after having conversations with them?
Just the power of the choice of an individual to say, I wasn't given a lot. I had a lot of strikes against me, but I can choose to do something different. And what's so interesting in talking to them is they aren't talking about themselves. They're talking about the people that they're able to help. They're talking about the folks that are coming into the One-Stop Auto Shop or the folks at Yarborough that are coming in and saying from the community, hey, can you help me? What's an opportunity? And the impact that they're having. Because when you see that, you're like, this is going to work. If they're getting the reward back from helping other people, that is what community is about, right? I mean, that's the definition of community. So this program, empowering them to help themselves, that's exactly what it is. And that's incredibly rewarding for me to see.
So the time that you've been here, I mean, there was a lot going on. When the pandemic was just, I mean, that's just one. You had the U.S. election taking place. We had a referendum for the ICJ. And so the involvement of the U.S. Embassy has been very prominent. Let's take a moment to recognize, too, that you also served as charge at a time where we have not had an ambassador for quite some time.
It's been since 18 months before I arrived.
Yes.
And so then I have served as charge. And we said ad interim at the beginning, which is the Latin term at the end of my title, which means I'm charge for the time being. A country can send a charge and they're just the charge and they're not sending an ambassador. I'm the deputy chief of mission. I'm the number 2 person. But in the absence of an ambassador, I took on that role. And so my Latin joke is that I haven't really been the charge ad interim. I've been the charge ad nauseum, until it made everybody sick. But it is something that we're looking forward to having an ambassador here because, listen, we're short-staffed. If you don't have an ambassador, then I step up into that role. Somebody else from my line supervisor staff has to step up and be acting deputy chief of mission. And so you just have fewer people. So having an ambassador here has a symbolic impact for the embassy. It also has a practical impact. And listen, we expect that the administration will be naming people relatively soon. I have no inside information on that. We are all curious. I'm looking at the papers every day. But I know that this is something that the president takes very seriously and very personally. As former head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he was responsible for the committee that confirms every ambassador. So this is something that throughout his career he's been involved with. So he is taking seriously. And in a bit of a change from the prior administration, is looking much more at promoting people who are professional diplomats to various positions around the State Department and overseas.
The general perception is that when we don't get an ambassador named is that the country relation is kind of a lower priority. How do you respond to that?
Every relationship we have bilaterally is important to us or we wouldn't have a mission here. And yes, we haven't had an ambassador, but if you drive by our building in Belmopan, I think that's a pretty clear statement of our commitment. If you look at the number of other Foreign Service officers who are here, and we're close to 40 of us, and compare that to any other mission, I think it's pretty clear how much we value this relationship. Now, the person at the top matters, and it's important, and yes, we'd like to see an ambassador here soon. I'd like to see an ambassador here soon. But the nature of the relationship is also everything else. You know, I'm here and I've had a much more public role than I would have as deputy, because that's somebody needs to be out in front. But again, I take credit for all the amazing work that my staff does, and all 40 of them, and the 130 or so Belizeans who work at the embassy, you know, all do this amazing work, and I'm incredibly proud of that. Yes, it is important to have an ambassador, and yes, we'll have one here, but that is not a symbol that there is any disagreement between the U.S. and Belize, or that there's that we're trying to send a message by not having an ambassador. It just hasn't happened yet.
Sure. And I did want to ask, you know, sort of similar to what Marlene asked earlier, but on a more personal note, what was it like for you being sort of at the helm during all of this sort of very tumultuous times politically, and you know, with all of COVID, and perhaps some of what you've learned on the job, you know, from your experience so far?
Wow, I can't even begin to express how much I've learned from doing this. I think the answer that I'm supposed to give is, oh, it's been a lot of work and long hours and the stress and the struggle. It has been the joy of my life so far. It has been so much fun. And if you're going to choose a place to have a job like I have for the past 3 years, again, I look at Belize. We're such good friends. You know, I don't have to worry about the media making up stories about me to try and discredit me, as happens in a lot of places. I don't have to worry about a constantly antagonistic relationship. I don't have to worry about the people of Belize yelling mean things as I walk down the street or anything like that. So this is a pretty amazing place because there is such an affinity between Belizeans and Americans. Listen, Belizeans get Americans. You understand where we're coming from. And so we're able to come here and not stand out or be different. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that. In terms of what I've learned, well, just this whole job, you know, and the opportunities to engage. A lot of my learning has been internal, you know, how to run an embassy from the position that I'm in, how to realize that if I walk by and say, or on my staff, boy, when did we paint that red? That might be interpreted as, oh, paint it back to whatever color it was. And so I have to be careful what I say because words matter and intent matters. And when I say, hey, can we make sure we put the garbage away out by my house so my dog's not eat chicken bones? And suddenly folks say, oh, he doesn't want any food on the compound. It's like, no, let's be careful here. So I've learned a lot over these past 3 years.
Yeah. Let's do a recap of some of the big programs that you have spearheaded. And we brushed past the ICJ. That was a very...
That was huge.
Yeah.
That was if you remember back to 2018 and 2019, that sucked all the oxygen out of the room for all those months and years.
And, you know, that, and I think perhaps the time of the USA election, it was a time where people were really paying attention to what you would say as the head of the mission here in the country and what side you were on or where you seemed more inclined. Talk about that, being able to stay the course of representing your government, even when people are so critical of your positions.
You know, I represent the people of the United States. I serve the policy of the administration that is elected by the people of the United States, and my loyalty is with the Constitution of the United States. There were issues, as in any country under any administration, that some people are going to disagree with. My responsibility is to say, what are our long-term strategic policy goals that we want to achieve? And in many ways, not get involved in what is effectively domestic politics in the U.S. So, you know, I've been asked questions, you know, on this set and other places, and I can back away and say, hey, really, that's domestic U.S. politics. What I'm here to talk about is the relationship with Belize. And that hasn't changed. That didn't change between the previous two administrations, and it hasn't changed that much now. I would say one difference in terms of the policy priorities. It's still important that we tackle the transshipment of drugs through Belize because they're going to the U.S., but it has a corrosive effect on Belize. The continued recognition of Taiwan as an important partner and a great relationship. Concern about migration moving through the region. You know, those are three big issues. One thing that I didn't talk about as much in the prior 2.5 years that I've talked more about in the past 6 months is climate change. That's back on our agenda. So that's one of those policy shifts where I say, hey, listen, the administration is not, the previous one is not making climate change a big deal. So I'm not going to spend as much time talking about that. I won't have as many programs that I can bring to bear.
Yeah.
This administration comes in, I say, okay, I will start talking about that more.
Because the policy has changed.
Because we've rejoined,
Yeah.
COP. It has been clear that dealing with climate change is dealing with economic policy, so it's been reintegrated. And does that mean I'm spending that much more time in my day on climate change? No, but we can start targeting messaging. We can bring programs to bear as they come online.
And it's great that you've had the experience in Belize because you can speak of the effects here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the secondary effects, where is all the sargassum coming from? Is it a result of climate change? Is it a result of effluent from rivers? Because that impacts the beaches and that impacts tourism. All these things are interconnected. And to be able to get out and about and see that on the ground makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So early in your time here, you were looking at some of the work that was ongoing with the U.S. Embassy through the CARSI grant. There were some investments made in reinforcing our defense forces here, training as well. Let's talk about some of the highlights over the past 3 years that stand out to you.
Sure. The CARSI program is, again, one of those long-term investments we're making because of Belize that's democratic, prosperous, secure, peaceful, all those things. Listen, that's good for Belize. That's also good for the U.S. That means, a reliable, stable partner in a region that has some troubling countries in it. And so that investment is made over time and looking toward the long haul, whether that's our military-to-military investment that's going on, whether that's through the CARSI INL to help with police and other security forces. I think we've invested about $42 million over the past few years in these programs. But again, we don't say, here's what you should do. Set a general target. Hey, we're interested in pursuing anti-trafficking. We're interested in pursuing programs that improve the efficiency of government. Come to us with your ideas. We will look at all the various grant options, have a committee that scores it all, pick the best one, work with them to make that even better. And then there's the money. Go do good things and let us know the results. And that's also builds up the capacity of civil society organizations here. So CARSI ESF, those CARSI grants have been great. The military-to-military financing has been incredibly important as well.
Of all the programs and projects, what stands out to you the most?
Oh, gosh. Maybe that's a little bit like, which is your favorite child?
I didn't say favorite. I said stands out.
Stands out. Well, it can't help but be what we've done most recently. But I do want to go back and say what was so important for the first 9 or 10 months that I was here was the run-up to the referendum. And again, at the end of the day, we didn't take a position on that. We just said, know the facts. Don't let fear be what guides your actions, because people don't make good decisions out of fear. But learn it, know it, and the government did a great job getting that information out to people. And then that referendum took place, and it was peaceful and open and incredibly well attended. I mean, all those things that are so impressive. And it then said, yes, we're going to go to the ICJ. So I was able to sort of take that one and say, okay, I'll continue to pay attention, but I can move that pot to the back burner, and things have continued to pay. So then we look through that early on. To our engagement more recently in all sorts of programs. It's hard to single out any one because there are so many things that we work on together.
So let's talk the personal experience in Belize now. So you said you've learned quite a bit. Did you learn to punta?
I did a version of it, I believe, and in fact, there's a video floating around somewhere of me at one of the Garifuna black, white, and yellow balls. And we were all out there, and I might not have been quite in time with everybody else, but I'm pretty sure I was doing some version of the punta.
But what else will you take back with you, when you do go, that special about Belize that you've learned or that's become a part of you?
Well, Belize is, for a place that's not geographically that big, has such an incredible diversity. So I'm a diver. So to be able to get out, within 6 months of being here, my sister and her whole family came down, and we went and stayed out on one of the keys and dove the Blue Hole and all the reef around there. And so I got to share Belize with my family, and they've kept coming back. Even in these times, I actually have a cousin visiting me right now who I think is taking my car and is on her way to Zanantanich to tour around. So to get to see all these things, people will always say, I want to come to Belize, and they want to go to a key or go to a beach. And every time I say, hey, great, well, let's do that for a few days, but you got to go to the jungle. You got to go see the Maya Mountains. You got to go there. When they're leaving, and I ask them, what was your favorite part? It's always the jungle. And they always say, because you can go to beaches a lot of places, you can do diving a lot of places, but the jungle here and the opportunities to be driving along the road, which I have, and suddenly a tapir walks out and has a look around, and you slow down and just watch him or her, and then head back in. I was in the Chicabel forest with Rafa Manzanero early one morning, climbed up the tower to see the sunrise, and 2 scarlet macaw fly by and land in a tree not far away. And a minute later, 2 of the large toucan fly by, and I'm like, oh, come on, have you planned this? This is too amazing.
Timed release.
Now I want a jaguar. But to have those sorts of opportunities, I mean, there aren't many places in the world you can do that and see them live flying around, and there it was on display. And so those sorts of moments, both the opportunity with the people and the nature that's here, it's just unique and incredible.
Yeah. And how's your Creole now?
So, starting with good morning, but I gotta say, when anybody asks, I always say, well, this stuff we chicken,
That might be an ad. Somebody might use that.
Yeah, I'll be careful with that one. Sorry, I'm not meaning to, but I.
Yeah. And other memories, I'm so glad you noted that. So you'll say you worked some time in Belize, and people will, ask you about how beautiful it is and whether or not it's worthwhile to visit. But what else will you say about culture or people or experiences?
To get out and eat the food in a place is to know its people. And when I first went down to Gariffa Settlement Day, this would have been back in late 2018, showed up, and I was still finding my way around, and I didn't know as much as I should have about the Garifuna culture, but went down, saw the arrival ceremony, went to the church, did the full mass in Garifuna, which was amazing, and then went to the stadium. What I hadn't planned was that I didn't bring a snack with me. And this was going on for a while, and I got hungry. And the woman who was showing me around, I said, hey, by the way, is there a place I can get a quick snack here? And she's like, well, my grandmother's place is a couple doors down. And so right after the event at Alejo Beni Park was done, we walked down there, and I went into her mom's kitchen, and she was making hudud.
Ooh.
And I was thinking to myself, boy, I should try and get that recipe, but it's also, I don't know that you can recreate the experience of having Grace's hudud in her kitchen, made with her hands of her love, and with Belize infused in all that food. I can try and make it somewhere else, but it's not the same as coming here and having the food here. And the same goes for all sorts of cuisine around the country. And I've eaten some very, very good food here. I will say also, I have a chef at home. I'm privileged enough to get to have that, usually for formal events and everything else. But when I don't have a formal event during COVID, she makes food for me. Her name is Stephanie Crawford, and she's local stuff. So I also eat fantastic Belizean food every day at home, made by a Belizean chef. So
nice. So you've learned to cook any of it?
So I like to think that I have various talents, but I'm not going to be so bold as to include cooking among them. I can follow a recipe, but it's not the same as watching a real artist at work.
All right. Now, I'm trying to figure out if we should ask you to do a bit more Creole or do the Punta Live. I don't know which one. Which one would be the best send-off for you? But Keith, I think one of the things that I wanted to ask is, you are going back to the United States at this time, at a time where they are actually at a new phase in the pandemic. They're reopening. People are going back to work. It's what we see or look forward to in our future, that light at the end of the tunnel. What does that signify for you?
Watching the process here and the difference it's made. Listen, we managed to cope. You know, we're here with masks on, but we get to be in person.
Yeah.
When couldn't be in person, okay, I was sitting in my upstairs guest bedroom, you know, staring at a computer screen, and we would do interviews remotely. Yeah. What I found was we are seeking to move to phase 3 of diplomacy strong. So that doesn't mean anything to anybody if you're outside the State Department, but it's what phase are we at in terms of reopening? We've started doing visa interviews again. In person at the embassy, so we're trying to get down our backlog. We are also going to restrict so that third country nationals aren't flying into Belize to go to the embassy to get their visa, because I want to focus on Belizeans who need that, and I don't necessarily want folks traveling in from outside. So, you know, we'll do some, but the focus is on Belizeans. But as I've transitioned back to going to the embassy and spending more time there and having the meetings in person and getting people together, I realized there is no substitute. You can't go from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting and not have everything that happens on the margins, not having the personal interaction. And so I'm not worried at any point that we're going to say, gee, we can do all this remotely. We don't need the big building of getting people together. People need to get together. Let's use the tools we've learned. Let's continue where we can to learn from the Zoom and the Teams and the WebEx and everything else when that's useful. But getting together in person, there is no substitute for this.
I agree. I'm happy to have you here in person as well. And as we continue to roll out our vaccination program, you know, as I said, the United States is further ahead. You've rolled out your vaccination to children as well. There is also a commitment for donations of COVID-19 vaccines. Tell us about where Belize fits into this and what's the status as of today?
Sure. From the announcement of 80 million vaccines from our stocks that were going to be distributed to, that was on, I think, June 3rd, to the June 10th announcement that we will be donating 500 million vaccines globally. So all that is complicated to roll out. And it's going to take a little bit of time. But while we've managed to vaccinate Americans, and we're well over 50% of Americans have had at least one dose, and as you see our numbers come down, that's also good for Belize, because those folks can travel, and it's a lot of Americans that support the tourism industry here, as frontline workers have been vaccinated. So very eager to get those vaccines out. What I don't know yet, and believe me, I'm asking, my staff is asking, because we want to know how many are coming here. And the answer is some, but I don't know how many. The folks that are making these decisions are saying, okay, what makes sense? Who has the capacity to take them? How quickly can they get there? Where's there the need? Belize is part of that mix. I would love to have a number for you right now, because that would be a really powerful statement. I don't have it yet. I'm not sure. But while the number of vaccines we're giving out to Americans in the state is going down as the demand is being met, we are still trying desperately to reach the pockets of people that have been less interested in getting vaccinated. That hasn't slowed our production of vaccines in the States. And you know, we're coming to this party and we're coming big. And we're going to keep rolling out those vaccines to the world, because that's our commitment to all our friends and partners globally.
Yeah, of course. And we do have cold storage now too, so.
And I don't want to jump on my story for a couple days from now, but there might be a super cold refrigerator coming your way.
Okay.
That I'll be handing, which will mean that any of the Pfizer or other vaccines that require the deeper cold storage, you'll have that facility soon. But don't tell anybody I told you.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll keep it between us.
Keep that quiet for
That'll
now.
be between us. But so that means we'll eagerly await further donations. But it is a significant step, and I did want to make note of that. Just, you know, what are you going to be doing in your last? I mean, when are you leaving, and what are you going to be doing your final weeks or days here?
Well, getting out and seeing as many people as I can in a safe and responsible way. We have to realize there's been a little bit of a spike in cases here. And that's partly because the epidemiological teams are doing a good job of going out and looking for it, because that's what's important. You can't just wait for it to come in. So we're seeing a little bit of a blip. So, again, urge, I'm fully vaccinated, but I'm wearing a mask. We need to protect each other. We need to not let our guard up until we get enough of those vaccines and enough arms and we see those numbers really drop away. We'll be dealing with COVID for a long time, but let's get to the point that we're successfully managing it and it's not managing us. So in my last 5 weeks or so here, I leave July 16th. If I can figure out how to get the dogs out, then I go back to Washington for a while. So it is trying to see as many people as I can, and sadly then to say, okay, well, this is goodbye for a little while. And trying to get out to get a last few glimpses of parts of Belize before I go.
What's on that list? What place did you do not get to that you wish you would have had the chance to do?
I've done a pretty good job of getting around to see most things. I never made it up to the Gallon Jug area, but that would be interesting in some of those areas. But it ends up really being more about how can I see people, and places too. But really, it's about trying to see as many people as possible.
Then, did you have any favorite spots here that you never get tired of going back to?
Belize.
Just the whole thing.
It's fantastic to go and see new things. But yeah, there are a number of spots around here. I mean, just driving up, into the Maya Mountains and Mountain Pine Ridge, and going to Big Rock Falls and Freelon Pools and all those areas, you just have these caves that are amazing. I will say, ATM Cave in Belize is globally one of the most impressive things you can do. I mean, that is on a lifetime bucket list, and I've done it twice. And so, that's a great tourism ad for ATM Cave, but that is something that's just so uniquely Belizean and such an incredible opportunity to do.
Tell us about your most memorable experience in Belize. Not necessarily work-related, just something that kind of gave you that moment to say, I'm so happy I'm here in this country.
Oh boy, that's a tough question. When I was first arriving here, I climbed on the plane. So this is July 2018, and I was again getting back to my dogs, my little dog Princess, my pot licker. I'm worried because I barely made the flight. Is she gonna have made it underneath onto the plane? And I'm busy, all frantic about my dog, and purser's coming over, and the captain finally said, I took a picture. She made it to the flight. She's downstairs, all set. That's great. And it's only at that moment that I realized the oncoming passengers were all saying, good afternoon, Mr. Barrow, to the person sitting next to me. And then I do one of those sort of sidelong glances. I'm like, wait, Barrow? The Prime Minister's name is Barrow. And sure enough, I'm sitting next to the former Prime Minister on the plane. And that was my introduction.
Great first impression.
I thought, do I say anything? It's one of those sort of strangely awkward
And your
moments,
dog really is named Princess.
Now, I'm the crazy dog person. So I lean over and say, Mr. Prime Minister, my name is Keith Gilgis, and I'm the incoming charge d'affaires. I just wanted to say it's a pleasure to meet you. And he was very gracious. And we chatted for a few minutes, and then the plane was taxiing. He has some back issues. I can relate. I've had some too. And we were quiet the whole way down. Plane touches down as we're taxiing to PGIA. He just leans forward and says, well, let me be the first to welcome you to Belize. And I'm like, well, Mr. Prime Minister, I get to say, when I arrived, the first person to welcome me to Belize was the Prime Minister. And he joked at me and said, Keith, you can tell him I escorted you all the way from Houston.
That is a very good story.
And to start with a story like that, and to build the relationship with everybody, including the current Prime Minister when he was opposition leader, and be able to have those relationships across the board is amazing and such a fantastic opportunity. So that high-level stuff, that's pretty cool too. And to be able to do it in a way that's so down to earth. It's not the chargé talking to the prime minister. A lot of the time, it's Keith talking to John, or it was Keith talking to Dean. And that's also such an incredible experience for me to have had during my time here.
Nice. All right. Well, I think what's going to happen now, Keith, we have a little bit of music that's going to come on. So I'm kidding.
Whoa.
No. We actually put together some clips from your visits that you've shared with us over
kidding.
this time. So we're going to take a look at that now. This is, I mean, it's only been 3 years, but you did say you wanted to guarantee as much access as we could get. And so we have a little clip compiled here. Let's take a look at that.
Hello, my name is Keith Gilgis, and I have the honor of serving as the new Chargé d'Affaires ad interim at the U.S. Embassy in Belize.
And welcome back. Of course, that was his personal introduction, but we now introduce to you, as we have on set, the U.S. Chargé d'Affaires, Keith Gilgis, with us. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, Marlene. Kevin, thank you very much for having me on.
Of the U.S. Embassy to Belize, Keith Gilgis.
Thank you very much for having me back.
All right. Good morning and happy 4th.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. Keith Gilgis, good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Gavin. Good morning, Marlene. Great to be back, if not in person, at least remotely.
We have been joined online via Zoom by the Chargé d'Affaires for the U.S. Embassy, Keith Gilgis.
As a matter of fact, we've got Keith Gilgis. He's actually the Chargé d'Affaires at the U.S. Embassy of Belize. Good morning. We also
I look forward to continuing my travels and engaging with the diverse peoples, communities, and cultures that exist in this remarkable jewel of a country. So if you see me out and about, please come on over and say hi. I want to hear your stories. I want to know about your experiences. But thanks for listening to me, and I look forward to hearing from you.
There you go.
Wow. I did make it on a few times.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You know, it's just like the duration of your time here. Half of it was in person, half of it was in Zoom. And it took us a while to get your name right.
I thought you did a really good job. Listen, I've got a weird name.
Yeah.
And what never happened is what happened to me when I was a kid and you had a substitute teacher. You know, if you see something you're not familiar with, you often try and turn it into a word you are familiar with.
Yeah.
And so the 2 middle letters of my last name would get transposed, and I would become Keith Giggles.
I think that's how I'll remember you.
It absolutely happens from time to time. Oh, here comes Mr. Giggles.
Did you often, did a lot of people get it wrong?
It's a weird name.
Oh, so you're used to it.
Giles is the usual one. What's that extra G doing in there?
Yeah.
And, nobody wants to pronounce it in this weird way, so it's actually completely phonetic. Gilgis. It's just as it is. So anybody's like, well, I'm not going to do the simple one. There must be something more complicated there.
All right.
But you know what? Keith. I'm fine with Keith.
So what's next for Keith?
So after we leave here, get a little bit of time off. I get married. And then I start, thank you very much. Then I start French language training in September, and I'll have that for 6 or 7 months until I can pass a test in French. And then next summer of 2022, I will be going out to Bujumbura, Burundi, where I'll be Deputy Chief of Mission at our mission there. So very excited about that. A very, very different challenge, but I'm sticking with the bees.
Yeah?
Right? From Belmopan, Belize to Bujumbura, Burundi.
And just before we close up, because we are running out of time, are there any final thoughts or words that you'd like to share with our viewers about your years here and your experiences in Belize?
Well, I am so grateful to you for the opportunity to come on to the show as often as I have and to talk about issues of mutual interest. I'm so grateful to all the people of Belize who have been so welcoming, not just to me, but all the members of my staff, to all the American visitors that come in here. As I said, it has been the honor of a lifetime to get to do this, and this has been such an incredible place. And so I'm grateful for the warmth of the people, the majesty of the ecology here and all that. So just thank you.
All right. Thank you, too. And now we close off with a little bit of punta that you'll be dancing. No, Keith, we won't do that to you. We want people to welcome you back. But we wish you the best. Thank you for being accessible. And, of course, thank you for sharing your final thoughts with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the importance of sea turtles. So stay tuned.